So thank you very much for your support, for your interest. Thank you very much, Lone, for being here with us tonight.
Hi, good evening, good morning. Can you see the presentation okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I will take a dive into the Mediterranean Sea and try to show you things that I think also in Israel and not many people are too aware of. And I usually start with this picture. This is the beach of Bat Yam. It's one of the cities near Tel Aviv. And you can see here a dolphin with this mark. And it's interesting because of a few reasons. First of all, most people don't know that we have dolphins in the Mediterranean coast offshore Israel. Second is that most people don't know that those dolphins are actually at risk because in this case, because of fishing vessels. This mark is actually a type of rope that is used in one of the fishing vessels in the bottom trawlers. And what happens is that the dolphin is chasing the fishing vessels because it tries to feed on some running fish. And then sometimes the rope just get entangled in the dolphin's body and push it downstairs to the bottom of the ocean. And because dolphins like us, they breathe oxygen and they breathe air, so the dolphin just suffocates. And this happens between 3 and 4 times a year to dolphins in Israel when we know it. Sometimes we don't find the body. So this is just some gloom starting point, but just to show you what we are dealing with. But actually, most people in Israel are not really aware of what's happening in the sea, because usually most people, we are terrestrial animals. We understand the terrestrial area. And even if we look at the sea, it looks like a huge mass of blue or green water. We don't really understand what's beneath it and how it operates. And that is what we're trying to do in the Blue Half, to make people understand that it's an amazing ecosystem and that it's fragile and that we need to preserve it. So like Jay said, this is the map that I grew up with in the classroom when I was a little kid. And they told us this is Israel, but actually this is Israel. Half of the area under Israel's responsibility is actually marine area, 25,000 square kilometers. And it provides 80% of our drinking water, half of the oxygen which is produced in this area, 25% of the carbon emissions that is sequestrated is actually done by the marine nature. And it's also the biggest and largest wilderness that we have still in Israel. These are a few pictures of things that can be found right at the offshore coast of Israel in the Mediterranean Sea. And you can find, like we said, dolphins. We have shark aggregations. We have lots of people that are going to dive and snorkel. And as you go deeper and deeper, sometimes you have to use special robots. You can find sponge gardens. You can find bathoids. These are, again, the sponge gardens, and even deep sea, deep water corals. So what is happening in the Mediterranean Sea? This is the Mediterranean Sea. I'm sure that you're all familiar with the picture. And it's interesting because 25%, a quarter of the species that we have in the Mediterranean Sea are endemic, are unique to the Mediterranean Sea. And it's a bit odd because the water for the Mediterranean Sea comes from the Atlantic Ocean. So how come there are species here, so many species which are unique? Because the water are supposed to mix. So reality is that the water don't really mix. It takes something like 80 years for a drop of water that enters the Gibraltar Straits from the Atlantic Ocean and circulates the entire Mediterranean Sea, take it something like 80 years to go out. And at that time, it has to pass through the Gibraltar Straits and also through another barrier, which is the Sicily Straits. And what happens, I apologize, this is in Hebrew, but what happens is that those two straits, the Gibraltar Strait and the Sicily Straits, are pretty shallow. So only very warm and poor in nutrients water go through it to the western basin from the Atlantic Ocean, and afterwards to the eastern basin. And if we look into the eastern basin of the Mediterranean Sea, which Israel is somewhere here at the easternmost point, what you have is actually a marine desert, because this is sea temperature. You can see that the Israeli waters in the Mediterranean Sea are very, very warm in relation to the Western Mediterranean. They are very, very saline, and they are very, very poor in nutrients. So what you have here is actually the corner that we have from the Mediterranean Sea is a desert. But in this desert, it's not barren. It's actually very rich in lots of oases. And you also have topography here, because if in the Israeli area, again, I apologize, this is in Hebrew, but this is the Carmel Mountain. This is the Zvulun Valley. You can also have topography inside the water. Underneath the water, you have here all kinds of rock ridges, and here you have the Carmel underwater mountain, and here you have the Dor slide. So you have a huge diversity of topography beneath the water. And if we take just a zoom in into one of the areas, which is the Achziv Canyon, it's in the border with Lebanon. This is the border with Lebanon. This is Lebanon. So what most people know is Rosh HaNikra. I guess some of you have been there or heard of it. This is the border with Lebanon. This is the Rosh HaNikra cliff. From nearby, it looks like that, but underneath the sea, you actually have an underwater canyon that goes 1,200 meters deep, and you can find all kinds of amazing animals over there. So we have a diverse world below the sea surface. And one of the questions that people ask us is, okay, you have marine nature, why do we need it? Why do people benefit from a healthy marine ecosystem? So the most prominent answer to that is, of course, climate and what we call blue carbon, because the ocean is actually the biggest sink for greenhouse gases in the globe. You will have on two main ways. You have here the algae, usually microscopic algae that make photosynthesis and absorb carbon dioxide and transform it into sugar, actually, to build their bodies. So they neutralize the carbon dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas. And also a lot of marine animals that take this carbon dioxide, and transform it into their skeleton. These are tiny creatures which are called foraminifera. They are unicellular, and they actually are very abundant in the ocean. And they take, again, the carbon dioxide and neutralize it into a form of a skeleton that afterwards, when they die, they just sink into the ground, into the bottom of the ocean, and the greenhouse gas is actually neutralized. A second benefit of marine nature is R&D, research and development. We have 65% of the active materials in medicines that are based on compounds found in living organisms, and out of that, around half is from marine organisms. You have a lot of medicines that were designed according to materials found in marine creatures, anti-cancer, anti-virus, diabetes, all kinds of other diseases that you have from marine creatures, especially sponges. And also, we have something which is called biomimicry. You know that people are very smart, and we have a lot of engineers, but the smartest engineer on planet is actually nature, because it had so much time during evolution to develop all kinds of structures. So on the right-hand side here, you can see a sponge, which is called the glass sponge, that has very unique structure of tiny skeleton needles, it is called. And according to this unique structure, this building in London was actually designed. So we have all kinds of patterns that we can learn from nature and try to imitate that on real life in engineering. And the last example, but there are a lot of other benefits, but the last example that I'm going to show here is marine ecotourism. You know that Israel is a very densely populated country. We have lots of people that trying to go to the different nature reserves and parks and other places just to breathe some open space. And the marine area is something that people have started to discover during the COVID lockdowns. Actually, people were going a lot to the sea and started to snorkel and started to dive, and this is a very important recreation resource. So I'm going to now give you a few highlights very briefly of some of our highlights in the marine nature. I don't know if you're familiar with the Lonely Planet guidebooks. When you come to a country, at the first page, you usually have like the 5 highlights that you must see. So I'm going to show you the 5 highlights or 4 or 5 highlights of Israel's marine nature, but most of them you will going to need a submarine in order to go and visit. So the first is the Blue Carmel. You know that Haifa and the Carmel are a very known terrestrial area in Israel. It's very green. This is an area on the right-hand side, an area called the Little Switzerland. But actually, the Carmel Ridge continues beneath the sea surface, and the mountain continues to dive into the deep of the ocean. And if we have those kind of animals on the terrestrial Carmel, on the Blue Carmel, that's what we have. We have, for example, this is around 80 meters deep. We have sponges. It's a type of animal that builds reefs, like the coral reefs in the tropical area, but this is a type of reef which is built by sponges. All the organisms that you see here with different shapes and colors are sponges. On the southern side of Israel, this is the Eftach Marine Dune Park. Again, if you are familiar with the Nitzanim Dune Park on the terrestrial area, you have lots of dunes, but beneath the sea surface, on the bottom of the sea, you have those dunes of sand dunes, and you can see lots of borers and the holes in them, and it's all the outcome of all kinds of animals that are living within the marine sand dunes. For example, I'm sure that you can see the fish, the batoid that lives here. You don't see it? Maybe now? It's gone. So these are the batoids. They specialize on hiding within the sand, and if you disturb them, they just go away in seconds. But these are one of the mega fauna that we have on the coastal marine sand dunes. But we have a lot of other organisms that live on those sand dunes. They are actually very rich, although on first sight you don't see them because they usually hide within the sand. This is a relative of the corals, which is called the sea feather. This is a type of fish called the Moses fish, which is actually flat. If you eat fish and chips in the UK, usually these are the fish, but I don't recommend on eating fish. And this is a very special type of sea urchin, which specializing in hiding within the sand.
אנחנו בדיונות שבין אשדוד לאשקלון, פארק ניצנים, סניף קצת את החולות שבין סיפור בת נטפון, שאמר סרג'יו, ימין ושמאל רק חול וחולרה. זהו שממש לא, יש פה דיונות חול מרגיבות, חיות נדירות, צמחייה עשירה. תעלו על חליפת צלילה במקום על החליפה של היומים, תגלו שהמקום המופלא הזה ממשיך עד לים. זו ממש תמונת ראי של פארק החולות, רק בתוך המים. פארק חולות ימי. החולות כאן מכוסים בים, ששוחים בו דגים, דולפינים וחתולי ים. השמורה גם משמשת כפעוטון לצבוני הים, שרק מקום. כשמביטים למעלה, רואים עופות ים שצוללים למים ושולים דג לארוחת צהריים. תעבור, גבר. עכשיו, זה לא סתם חול. מצא הרך יכול להיות גם קשוח, יש בו מלא חיים. תיעדו כאן קרוב ל-700 מינים של יצורים ימיים, ממש שיפון ודגים צעירים.
So this was a part of one of a dozen of short films that we have produced in order to show the beauty of the marine nature and to make it accessible to the public, but also to policymakers. I will show you in a few minutes how we made special workshops to policymakers and to planners in Israel and persuaded them by making those beauties accessible that they should promote marine conservation and marine protected areas. So this was the Iftach Marine Park. And the next example is the Poleg Sponge Garden, another sponge garden, very unique. This is near the coast of Herzliya or Tel Aviv, but 15 kilometers offshore. And you can see here, these beautiful colors and shapes are all sponges. You can see here a starfish on top of a sponge, and you can see here the yellow thing here is a sponge, and over this, the white strange stuff is actually eggs of a cuttlefish. So just to understand what is a sponge is an animal that doesn't move, but it feeds by taking out the material, the small materials, small particles from the seawater. It can be viruses, it can be small particles, and it just absorbs it into its body and take out whatever is left, and it can pass a huge volume of water and just purify it, and has a very special role in combining the biomass from the upper water column to the sea bottom. So it is actually an ecosystem engineer. This is not from Israel, this specific video, but basically what we call the sponges are the marine living hotels, because on each sponge you have a lot of other organisms that find shelter and a home within the sponge. You can see the starfish, you can see crabs, you can see fish, you can see here a type of a snail with no special snail with no shell. And this is actually like the coral reef. It is a host of an enormous amount of species. You can see here the diversity of the sponge garden offshore Herzliya. You can see the different arrows. Each of these is a different species of a sponge. You can see here an example of a huge sponge, very special sponge, which has lots of big cavities that within are living all kinds of other organisms. You can see here all kinds of predators that come to live and to forage near the sponge garden. This is 90 meters deep, 15 kilometers offshore Tel Aviv, an octopus. So this was a few of the sites, the beautiful sites that we have in the Mediterranean Sea. But the question is, okay, so why do we need to do anything about it? And this is where the blue half is coming into action. And we have a lot of troubles. What you see on the right-hand side is a bottom trawler, a type of fishing vessel that comes after a night of fishing, of towing a net on the sea floor. And you can see that the majority of the fish are thrown back to the sea dead. And every once in a while, there is a fish for selling that is going to marketing on this blue box. On the middle, you can see artisanal fisheries. This is offshore Magan Michael. And you can see people that are fishermen that are taking out during the breeding season of the fish, taking out a huge amount of fish. Most of them are females filled with eggs of the next generation of those fish. And on the left-hand side, what you can see are recreation fishermen, sport fishermen. They are not making a living out of it. They're just going for fun. These specific fishermen are two guys that went out for a fishing excursion and took out on one day 8 groupers. Groupers are the tigers of the sea. They are the top predator of the marine rocky reefs. And you can see that they took out in this day 2 people just for fun. 8 of those monsters, a huge grouper. This is the leopard of the sea, and they took 8 of those in one day. Just 2 guys not making a living out of it, just for fun. So when we started the Blue Half project a decade ago, 2012, Israel's marine area had 0.3% marine protected areas, which is nothing, as opposed to something like 25% on the terrestrial area. There was no dedicated marine enforcement unit, so there was hardly any enforcement on the little MPAs that there were. No fisheries management, no law stated where, when, how, and how much to fish. There was no protection on top predators like groupers, and sharks and rays were actually protected, but nobody enforced fishing of those important animals. And the numbers were devastating. We are looking at something like 3 or 4 dolphins dead each year because of fishing, 2,700 sea turtles injured or dead because of fishing every year only in Israel. It's an amazing number. Thousands of protected animals like sharks and rays and sea feathers, which is a type of coral. So we are looking at a massive annual impact of fishing on a lot of protected creatures. In the terms of the spatial pressures, you can see all those black smear over here. So all those area, which is the majority of Israel territorial waters, was impacted by bottom trawling, which is again a type of fishing vessel that is just towing a net on the seafloor and just taking out everything on it, from corals to sponges to protected fish, everything. And in the deep sea, at the exclusive economic zone, we are looking at a lot of area which is used for gas explorations and drilling. And on top of those local problems, we had climate change, which is a major driver of extinction in the Eastern Mediterranean. And one of the examples is the Mediterranean purple sea urchin. And you can see here, this is a lab experiment that when you take the population of the sea urchins and you take the temperature and you warm the water, you go up from 24 degrees Celsius to 25, 26, 27, everything is good. Once you reach 30 degrees Celsius, boom, the majority of the population of the sea urchins just dies. And this actually was a species which was very abundant in the shores of the Mediterranean Sea, and we hardly find any living sea urchins today, because the sea temperature in the Eastern Mediterranean went up 3 degrees Celsius in the last 3 decades. So what's the strategy? What you have today is a huge mechanism of destruction. You have fishing, you have habitat destruction, you have climate change, you have invasive alien species, and they are all working synergistically together, and they just destroy the marine ecosystem. So our strategy is to take out what we can deal with at the local level, at the national level, which is fishing and habitat destruction and pollution. And then we can make the ecosystem more resilient to cope with climate change and invasive alien species. And this is, of course, based on a lot of research globally. So this is the strategy. Deal with the local drivers that are destroying nature: fishing, habitat destruction, and pollution. So how do we do it? So the Blue Half focusing on marine ecosystem and species, and we have 4 main courses of action. We have marine reserves, the Sea Watch application, fisheries management, and marine spatial planning. And I will talk a bit about each of them. So we will start with the fisheries reform campaign. So when we started, people were really not aware of anything that is happening at the fishing in Israel. It looked okay. And we started to lobby very heavily with a lot of media coverage, lots of campaigns with the public, even with some of the fishermen that also wanted to change. And this is an interesting example. This is a restaurant in Tel Aviv that used to sell a protected species of a lobster. And we approached them and he said, look, you're selling a protected species, don't do it. And they said, okay, we don't mind. And then we just went there and we put some warning ads on the protected species, on the protected lobster near the restaurant, and we publicized it in the social networks. And a day afterwards, they said, no, we're not going to sell any more protected species, just take off those morning obituaries ads. So this was very effective. We also made a very thorough scientific and economic analysis of the entire fishing market, and we used that to approach policymakers, especially in the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Agriculture, and the Ministry of Environment. We made a lot of stakeholder engagement meetings with the general public, with policymakers here, and even with the fishermen themselves. This is a fishing equipment store that we made a lot of engagements with the fishermen themselves. And then we compiled, took us a year, and we compiled a strategic plan to fisheries management in Israel. And this is very nice, and this was done with the government officials in the ministries, but the minister itself, he didn't want to promote it. And then we had to go on something which is a bit less nice and cooperative than working together on a plan. And we had to start to do what NGOs are good at, which is throwing stones on the government. So we filed 2 petitions to the High Court of Justice, and we demanded to restrict certain limitations in the fishing licenses. We succeeded, and the government said, okay, we're going to limit some of the fishing. And then the fishermen filed their own 4 counter petitions, and we had to tackle those as well. But at the end, we won. And as a parallel approach, we promoted our own fishing reform bill in the parliament, in the Knesset. We made a lot of noise also. This is in the Knesset. You can see here this is one of the MPs, and this is MKs, and this is one of the pictures that we brought. And we made a massive campaign on the head of the economic committee in the Knesset and the Minister of Treasury. And at the end of the day, we have succeeded. After 4 years of work, in 2016, we have passed the legislation reform in the Knesset, in the parliament, that determined for the first time where, when, how, and how much to fish. You can see here 40%, the red area, 40% of the marine territorial area is banned, closed to bottom trawling, and also up to 90 days fishing moratorium. And a third of the vessels were actually buyed out. This is what you see here is a bottom trawler that was buyed out by the government with money, with government money, and then was sunk as a diving site for recreation diving. We also had a ban on a very destructive fish practice, which is scuba diving with spearfishing. We had a lot of other limitations on all different fishing practices. But a law approved is very nice, but you have to enforce it. And what you can see here is the first season after the law has been approved that was supposed to be a breeding season moratorium. This is the Jaffa port. You can see here, business as usual. People are fishing when they're not allowed to fish. And then what we have done is we have approached the government and we have made a massive campaign, and we said you have to establish a dedicated marine enforcement unit within the Nature and Parks Authority, not the Ministry of Agriculture, because only the Nature and Parks Authority has the motivation and the means to actually, and the knowledge to actually enforce, and we have succeeded. On the middle of 2018, it was decided to establish a dedicated marine enforcement unit within the Nature and Parks Authority, 6 dedicated teams, 4 or 5 in the, actually it's 4 in the Mediterranean Sea, 1 in the Sea of Galilee, and 1 in the Gulf of Eilat. And we also had used the public, and this is why we have invented the Sea-Watch application. It's an application that you can download free of charge, and you can report any marine hazard that you can see. For example, and it goes directly to the rangers. It has your GPS location from the mobile phone. You can choose the category. For example, this is a fishing selling of protected species. You can add a picture that you take online, and you can add some details. This is a real report from a citizen that a guitar fish, which is protected, is actually being sold at the moment as we speak in the Jaffa port, and then it goes directly from the application to the rangers, and they can come and enforce and actually use it as an evidence. So it's not working 100% of the time, but when it works, it's like magic. This is from 3 months ago. At 1:30 afternoon, we got a report from a sailor that has seen something odd in the water. He thought that it's a ghost net, an abandoned fishing net. Less than 3 hours afterwards, the net was taken out of the water by the marine rangers of the Nature and Parks Authority. They get it online automatically. And another hour afterwards, it was at the shore, safe, not catching any fish or other animals. We had a lot of other events. This is an oil barrel washed to shore in one of the marine reserve that was reported by a citizen and was taken out by the rangers. You can see it here. This is somebody who fished during the breeding season and was actually, he got a fine from the rangers. This is a guy who fished within a marine reserve. You can see here the ranger and the ranger jeep. He got also fined. So this is the Sea-Watch application. And the biggest campaign that we have in the previous years is the Marine Reserve campaign. So like I said, a decade ago, we had 0.3% of the marine area, which was protected in marine MPAs. And the Nature and Parks Authority wanted to reach 20%. But that was a decade ago, and they had no progress in achieving that. And after a lot of work with in collaboration with the Nature and Parks Authority, on 2020, we've been able to persuade the planning administration to designate 18% of the marine area of the territorial waters and protected areas. Now, that's a general designation. That means that in order to fulfill it, we have to have a declaration, and that takes time. At the moment, we have 5%. From 0.3, we have went up to 5% of declared marine reserves, and we are aiming at reaching 20 or 30% by the year of 2030. It's a very ambitious goal, but we really want to achieve that. How did we do it? So we worked closely with the planning administration in order to fight for every area and every one of those polygons which are presented earlier. This is the Carmel, the Blue Carmel. This is the Sponge Gardens. This is the Eftach Marine Park. We have been able to persuade the planning administration and the government that the marine reserve should be a no-take zone. That means no fishing at all. It sounds trivial, but the reason why the majority of the protected marine areas globally are fading is because it's allowed to fish over there. Sometimes only one fishing practice, sometimes only a part of the year, but the majority of the protected marine areas globally are just failing because of that. And we've been able to persuade the government that even if Israel has started really late on promoting protected areas, that's actually an advantage. We can learn from other countries' mistakes. And now there's a policy. There is no fishing in marine reserves in Israel. This is a huge achievement. How did we do it? We took all those planning committees and all those officials, and we have conducted a full-day workshop with experts. You can see here the Marine Lab. You can see here Erez, which is a PhD student, showing them sea urchins. You can see here Tal. She's already graduated, but she was a PhD student as well. She's showing them sponges. You can see here the planning committee of the Haifa district trying to solve a planning practice that we have put them in trying to design a marine protected area. So we have made a lot of things to try and make them feel like protected areas are their goal. And this is the cheap trick. We took the district committee of the Haifa area that were supposed to discuss the Blue Carmel Marine Reserve. We took them, and they actually have re-released a rehabilitated sea turtle into the marine reserve, the future marine reserve, and they were all very excited about it. This is a huge animal, like 80 centimeters long. Very impressive. It was wounded and then rehabilitated for half a year in the rehabilitation center. And once this planning committee has participated in releasing this sea turtle to the future reserve, you can be sure that they have approved 2 weeks after they have approved the marine reserve of the Blue Carmel. We've produced a lot of professional materials to show the science behind marine reserves and to show the beautiful pictures of the beautiful nature in Israel. And the current challenge that we have in terms of MPAs of protected areas is the deep sea. The deep sea is actually very far from sight and far from the mind. But the flagship site is called the Palmachim disturbance. It's between 30 and 60 kilometers west of Tel Aviv, between 400 meters deep to 1,200 meters deep. And this is what you can find over there. You can find deep sea corals, which are very rare. It's all explored via special robots. These are corals. You can see there bluefin tuna, coral gardens. And you can find those amazing pictures. What you can see here are deep water sharks. This is 1,200 meters deep. You can see here rare sharks, and all those brown stuff that you see here are actually shark egg cases. And you can see within, this is the embryo's mouth, this is the yolk sac, and you can see thousands of eggs just laying on the seafloor on complete darkness, 1,200 meters deep in this site. All those small lights that you can see here shining are actually eyes of sharks. This shark is called the blackmouth cat shark. This is another one called the rough shark. It's very rare. You can see here the sea urchins, and all those brown things are actually shark eggs. This is a shark nursery, a shark kindergarten, if you will. And what we have done here is to try and promote an MPA, and this is very challenging. I won't get too much into it, but because it's in the exclusive economic zone, it's actually very challenging in terms of legislation to promote an MPA over here. And we've made a campaign. This is how it was designated at first, very tiny, and this is how it was designated after some lobbying that we've done, much bigger. And we have filed also a proposal to the Mediterranean Fisheries Commission. And this is a hope spot. If you've heard of Sylvia Earle and her organization Mission Blue, the Palmachim disturbance was designated a hope spot by Sylvia Earle, and it was going pretty well. But then we discovered that the Ministry of Energy has actually issued an exploration gas license for a Greek gas company called Energean. And we have filed 2 petitions to the High Court to try and stop that. And at the end of the day, on September 2022, the Minister of Environment has declared the first marine reserve in the exclusive economic zone, 450 square kilometers, no fishing, no drilling, a huge accomplishment. This is 4 times bigger than the biggest marine reserves in Israel to that point. And also the gas exploration license was returned to the government with no drilling in this site. And our challenge now is to expand this success. It's 2% of the exclusive economic zone that was declared a marine reserve. And our challenge now is to declare 30% of the exclusive economic zone of the deep sea as marine nature reserves. This is a huge area. You can see here the territorial marine area. You can see that it's fairly shallow. It's the continental shelf. And you can see here the huge area of the exclusive economic zone. It's the deep sea, going to 2,000 meters below sea surface. And what we have done in the past 2 years is to map the habitats and the ecosystems in the exclusive economic zone. It was not done until that point. We are collaborating with the leading universities in Israel to do that. And we have designated, and we have launched 2 months ago, we have launched the Marine Nature Reserve for the exclusive economic zone master plan. This is how it looks like. It's very ambitious. We're talking about 6,300 square kilometers. It's a huge area. That's what we want to do by 2030. And you can see here 3 months ago that the Minister of Environment on our Marine Convention, Ocean Day Convention, she was declaring that she's adopting the plan. It's not over yet. We have to do a lot of actions in order to fulfill this, but this is a very promising start. You can see here that the logos of the Ministry of Environment and the Nature and Parks Authority and the Antique Authority are all in this booklet that we have produced of the master plan. And just to wrap up, another thing that we do is not to tackle only the ecosystem and the area, but also species. You can see here 2 very important species, the groupers. They are very important because they regulate the entire health of the reef. And after 2 petitions to the High Court, we have to date failed to protect the dusky grouper, but we've been able to push the government to declare another grouper, the gold blotch grouper, as a protected species. This is a very important achievement because it's something that fishermen are. This is a prize fish for fishermen, and we've been able to do it, although they have opposed. So just to sum up, 10 years of work in the Marine Blue Half. We filed 12 legal petitions. We've joined another 9 legal procedures to protect our position. We have filed 2 laws, 2 bills in the parliament, 20 policy papers, 20 workshops at conferences, 10 webinars, over 100 press items published, over 50 million social media exposures. And to date, like I said, we have been able to revolutionize and reform fisheries management and regulation and enforcement, to establish a novel marine enforcement unit, to declare with the Nature and Parks Authority 700 square kilometers of reserves, to declare the gold blotch grouper as protected. But we have many challenges remain to declare and effectively manage 30% of the marine area, both of the EEZ and the territorial waters, to complete the buyout and to abolish bottom trawling fisheries in Israel. It's destructive. We can't have it. And to promote environmental legislation for the deep sea, for the exclusive economic zone. And with that, I thank you for your patience. And if you want to support us, you can enter this link and donate. That's it. Thank you.